Hello, my name is Lola, and I'm going to be reacting to Garfield and Friends Nostalgia Critic by Channel Awesome. I love Garfield. I grew up watching Garfield as a kid, and so let's go. Oh, but if you want to like, comment, subscribe to my channel, you can. If you don't want to, that's fine too. Here we go.
This episode brought to you by HelloFresh. Delicious pre-measured ingredients and simple chef-made recipes delivered to your doorstep every week. Also brought to you by Raycon. Earbuds that look, feel, and sound better than ever. Hello, I'm the Nostalgia Critic guy. Remember it so you don't have to. Let me ask you something. Can a character be too big to fail? If Mickey Mouse is in something bad, people are still gonna buy his products. If Snoopy is in two things that are bad, people are still gonna love him. If Superman goes down the route Superman went, there's still gonna be a fan base. These are characters that are so popular they don't need everything to be a success, because people look at them and will always see something they connect with in a positive way. And when you think about it, there aren't a ton of characters like that. I mean ones that could last over 100 years in new stories and they don't need to be good to still sell merchandise. With that said, is Garfield one of those characters? I'll admit, I was obsessed with Garfield when I was younger, and it's amazing to think he's still around so long after his creation in 1978. But compared to characters like Bugs Bunny or Woody Woodpecker, that's not very long at all. Yet I feel like he's cemented himself in this too-big-to-fail role. Even after I've ripped apart his movies and made a joke or two about his comic strips being pretty uninspired as of late, absolutely none of that brings down my enjoyment of this character, and I find that fascinating. So what is it that still makes me love this character, and what is it that says there's a part of me that should maybe know better? Well, while the highlights of Garfield can probably be seen in his early specials, like Garfield on the Town and the Christmas special and so forth, I feel like both his strengths and weaknesses show the most in the Saturday morning cartoon, Garfield and Friends. Released back in 1988, Garfield was arguably at his peak around this point. He was everywhere on t-shirts, fruit snacks, mugs. Even commercials were hiring him to sell other things.
If you want to be treated like a fat cat, why not apply for the American Express card?
At the time, though, the setup was just Garfield's a lazy house cat. It was very domesticated, and the specials again at the time showed that. In Garfield Goes Hollywood, they win a talent show and it changes everything. This was the most exciting thing to happen to them at this point. Garfield and Friends had to do 13 to 26 episodes a year, each containing 3 stories, and most of it handled by one writer, Mark Evanier. It probably goes without saying they didn't keep it to the lazy antics of a domesticated house cat because that wouldn't get too many exciting stories. So the show got a lot crazier with mad scientists making robotic versions of Odie, the TV coming to life, aliens visiting, pretty much every rushed Saturday morning idea because this probably was a very rushed Saturday morning idea. Yet Garfield still made it work. Voiced by the legendary Lorenzo Music, I think his performance represents why he has so much staying power.
I'll do something constructive with my time. I'll go to sleep.
Though I honestly think it's often misinterpreted. If I was to ask you why do people connect to Garfield, what would you say? Probably something along the lines of he's a lazy pessimist and we all want to be lazy pessimists. What a terrible message. I don't think that's why people like him, though that is part of it. At first, yes, that was the character. He sat around and did nothing but insult people. Even the later comic strips would make fun of this. But when his popularity exploded, there were other elements that made him so lovable. For example, if he was so lazy, why would they open the show with him dancing? Why does he always seem to be full of energy? Why is he considerably slimmer than when he first started out? If he hates everything, why does he seem so playful? Why does it look like he's having fun so much of the time? Why does he try to save a friend if he doesn't care about anyone? Being a lazy pessimist is what he enjoys, but it's not who he is. Those are, how do I put it, his hobbies. There's a sense that he's an excitable little kid and a cynical old man both at the same time. which after owning Cats of My Own, I can assure you is pretty on point. The two opposites complement each other because he ironically works hard to be lazy and pessimistic. He'll put a lot of energy into making a giant sandwich if it means he can eat it. He'll come up with a clever way to launch somebody if it means he can nap longer. Even when he does something terrible to a character, you can tell he knows somebody will stop it before it goes too far. He won't exercise, but he'll play. He won't do chores, but he'll work for what he wants. He mocks people, but knows if they weren't there, he'd have nothing to entertain him. Put simply, Garfield has fun working his ass off to be lazy, and I think that's what people connect with. The show, in a strange way, is very similar. Keep in mind, this is back when most kids' cartoons looked cheap and were only around to sell toys. Garfield and Friends did indeed look cheap. Look at the backgrounds, for God's sake. It looks like a mix of finger paint and crayon. Clearly they were told, just draw until you recognize what it is, then stop. They clearly had little time to work on this. What makes up for it, though, isn't just the lead, but the writing that tries a little harder than it needs to. Make no mistake, this is not phenomenal writing, but it does put in a little extra work even though, because of the character's popularity, it wasn't necessary. Even when there's stories about robots and monsters through a lot of fourth wall jokes, they make it clear you're not supposed to be that invested. I actually feel like they subtly mock themselves and what a shoestring budget they have all the time. In one episode, there's a movie they can't escape because it's everywhere, almost like how Garfield was everywhere. They show how fast they just wanted to get this movie out, though, by them literally working their title to be most of the dialogue. Even the sequel number it is.
Kung Fu creatures on the rampage, too.
You're not Sylvia. You're one of the Kung Fu creatures on the rampage. Two.
There's another episode where a guy keeps scamming John by dressing up like other people. First off, most kids shows at the time would have this guy mess up John's name once and keep repeating it. But they have a different pronunciation every single time.
Arbuckle?
Arbuckle.
Close enough, Mr. Arbuckle. You must be Mr. Arbarnacle. Right here, Mr. Arsenic. Well, Mr. Arsenio, it's my car, Mr. Arborday. Belongs to Mr. Arbuffle. Mr. Arbinky.
Again, it's not much, but it's appreciated when you saw the writing on other kid shows. The final time he shows up, Garfield presents the possibility this could be a financial issue.
Pardon me, you need a mechanic?
Either that's the same guy or our budget for new actors is in a lot of trouble.
There is literally an episode where they say a lot of people have pointed out the mistakes on the show.
Several of you have written in lately to say that you spotted mistakes on this show. This is not possible.
And they go out of their way to make as many mistakes as possible in the episode, challenging you to find them all. I forget what the final count was, but I'm pretty sure it went into triple digits.
I promise you will never make another mistake on this show. Come on, boy, it's 10 a.m. Time for a midnight snack.
It even mocked other shows in their styles. In one episode, Garfield wakes up in the wrong cartoon, and they surprisingly do a good job mimicking shows like G.I. Joe, Transformers, and My Little Pony.
The mutant gnome flees.
We're going to teach you how to be nice to everyone and never ever be mean.
I want the giant robots back.
There's another one where they do a pretty mean take on the Care Bears called the Buddy Bears, where no matter how you feel, you always have to agree with the mass majority.
Oh, we are the Buddy Bears, we always get along. If you ever disagree, it means that you are wrong.
They hate anything violent and antisocial, but if you disagree with them, they'll use brute force on you.
You see what happens when you disagree, kids?
They drop a 16-ton safe on you.
Kinda like a version of the Care Bear stare. Or, the internet.
So you see, kids, never have an opinion of your own.
Again, this isn't riding on par with a lot of modern day cartoons, but back then, shows were so rushed and there was no time to put much thought into it. Yet they did their best with what they had. Yes, even with...
Run for your life! Our pig is on the rampage!
Yeah, okay, we're gonna need a break before we talk about them. This butterfly is my soul, deep in the heart of my passion angst, and within that honor lies hello. So if you haven't seen this show, you might be wondering what the "and friends" part of the title is referring to. Well, that's most people's least favorite part of the show, U.S. Acres.
It's a delightful little diner, and the service here is really swell.
Yeah.
I want the giant robots back.
This is a group of farm animals that's actually it the more I think about it. It's just a group of farm animals. It was based on Jim Davis's other comic strip of the same name that had such a short run, they actually lasted longer in the show than in comic strips. And to the cartoon's cred, I didn't hate them, I just didn't like them. Both the strip and these segments were clearly aiming at even younger viewers, so the humor and characters were much more friendly. It should also be known that under the Children's Television Act, kids shows had to be educational in the hopes of battling series that were just trying to sell you toys. And this is why so many PSAs appeared at the end of many cartoons in the day. US Acres usually covered that avenue because almost every episode had a lesson to it. Sometimes a Garfield segment would work them in, but 9 out of 10 times this was US Acres' department.
I stood up to him and it all worked out. You don't need big muscles if you have a big brain. Gravity is important. Think what this world would be like without gravity.
What the hell are you talking about?
The main character Orson was always big into reading books. That right there was pretty easy. Remember to read. Boom, done.
You know Orson, he can't put a book away without reading it first. He'll never get him put away.
Other episodes involve the importance of friendship, not being afraid, using your imagination, you know the drill. Honestly, if this was its own separate show, I don't think a ton of people would have a problem with it. It just always interrupted what was a much more enjoyably cynical show. In fact, sometimes what that cynical show was mocking seemed to be represented in these segments.
A myth is a story from ancient history. Some parts might be true, but a myth was a way of explaining the unexplainable.
On today's show, we're going to teach educational things.
Well, folks, you know what it takes to cause me to lose my appetite.
But truly, they weren't awful. As the series continued, they did get a little bit more of a bite to them. Any episode around Roy or Lanolin was usually okay because they had a little bit more of a meaner side. Wade sometimes got a laugh because he was afraid of everything, and Howard Morris's delivery was usually pretty good.
Give it to me straight, Doc. I can take it.
Wade.
No, I can't. Lie a little bit.
Even that clip of the Buddy Bears crushing a disagreeer? That was US Acres.
Oh, we are the Buddy Bears, we never have a fight. If you have a point of view, then keep it out of sight.
So yeah, it did get a little better as it went along. But clearly, people were here for Garfield. Speaking of which, in between the segments there were quickies, which were animated versions of the newspaper strips. These were usually a little awkward because the animation was so cheap that, ironically, the comic strips seemed to have more life than the actual moving picture. Nevertheless, the show did prove to be popular over the years. It ran from 1988 to its cancellation in 1994, and even then it was still doing pretty well. So well that when CBS needed to make some major budget cuts, they found Garfield and Friends was pretty successful in syndication, so making further episodes didn't seem necessary. The show was taken off the air, and maybe just in time, as I guess the writers just discovered rap, and let's just say it went as well as you would expect.
Oh, how I want to kick and clobber when I get covered with doggy slobber. Just last night I was having a snack and this guy comes in with a sack full of food he said was really great.
Well, it's no Bartman. Even the intro got a similar makeover.
He's groovy. Double rabble babble, he's a cat, and I know that.
It's good the show points out they know he's a cat for a second. I thought they just did that for a rhyme. When the movies came out, they did remaster the episodes, I guess. They put them on DVD, but I guess some of the episodes didn't get remastered or not the way they wanted, so they make it look like you're watching a lower res version on John's TV. At that point, just blow up the lower res version because that is far more distracting. They also use Flash animation to redo the opening that, I guess, knowing Flash could look worse, but like I've said in the past, 2D only looks good when the movement is done through a new drawing, not taking one drawing and moving it around with a computer, which you can tell they did a lot for in this intro. Still, I'm glad not only that there was enough of a following to do a release, but that they also start running them on YouTube. I've only seen a little bit of the other shows made around Garfield, and for me personally, I think the 3D animation's a big mistake. These characters were clearly designed for 2D, and they just look like poorly rendered dead puppets being moved around. Garfield was, hell, still is a comic strip, and I think should be represented in that style. It just doesn't look right in 3D. Or at the very least, cheap 3D. With that said, Frank Welker is an amazing replacement for Lorenzo Music, and it still has that playful cynicism that sells as many products as Garfield does. Well, I guess it's fine for what it is. Garfield and Friends really was the pinnacle of that huge Garfield craze. It represented both what worked and what didn't work about him, and sometimes how they were one and the same. There was a cheapness to him, a hamminess to him, a sense of humor that thought of adults but never pushed the envelope in any way. On the other hand, that's kind of what's charming about it. It didn't rock the boat, it just wanted to entertain people with the little it had, and even with its corniness, there was still a passion to it. Compare this to, say, the Garfield movies. These looked a lot more expensive, yet it never felt like it had a soul. Saying dated pop cultural references like got milk and dropping product placements every 2 seconds seemed more like something this show would mock. Those movies made a lot of money though. It made a lot of money giving what looked like no understanding of what made the character beloved. Garfield was, and arguably is, popular enough where you don't need to put in effort. But this show did. Was it a ton? I'm not sure. Given the limitations they had, maybe. But either way, it was enough. On its own cheap and rushed conditions, it acquits itself, while staying true to what the character is and getting some laughs along the way. I guess it's weird to talk so long about a show that's decades old that didn't really change anything. But as someone who does have a soft spot for this character, I appreciate that there's still some things that hold up about it. I don't know, maybe because I've been around for a while, I'm becoming fascinated by other characters that have been around for a while. It's neat seeing how people will go from loving to hating and all the various transformations it'll go through. I don't think in the 80s people would have gotten into or even understood Garfield without Garfield. But that blew up so much years later that Jim Davis even allowed an official release of it. He was in on the joke. Even a lot of the fan art around Garfield has become so deranged and so bizarre, and I think a lot of that is not just how memorable the character is, but what an impact his longevity has had, whether you find yourself sick of that or not. I guess looking back, this character still leaves a big impact on me, despite him being an unapologetic money-making icon, or maybe even because he's an unapologetic money-making icon. In a strange way, that kinda seems on brand for him. And that's probably why this show, I feel, represents him best, because it is so on brand. It's corny, it's cheap, it's familiar, it's just clever enough to be around for what feels like forever, and depending on where you are in life, you're either annoyed or comforted by that.
Eat and be lazy, kids, and someday you'll have your own show too.
I'm a nostalgia critic, guy, remember? So you don't have to.
Oh, we are the Buddy Bears, we always get along.
Well, that's my reaction to Nostalgia Critics Garfield and Friends by Channel Awesome. See ya in the next one. Bye.